Naomi Ellis never believed in surprise visits. She liked precision. Color palettes that made a room feel like a quiet prayer. Clients who respected deadlines. Men who said what they meant. Rare, but not impossible. That's why it shocked her most when she found herself standing outside the glass doors of Grayson Lorne's penthouse, heart pounding like it belonged to someone reckless. She had come back a day early. No text. No call. Not even a hint of warning. She told herself it was just brunch. A thoughtful gesture. Their favorite pastries from Lakeview, still warm in the brown paper bag she clutched like a lifeline. A sketch rolled under her arm for his walk-in closet, complete with custom shelves and hidden lighting. But truth had a strange way of whispering before it shouted. And as Naomi stepped inside, into the place she'd spent weeks designing, with care, intention, and trust, what she saw changed everything. A woman's voice. A laugh she recognized. A wine glass on the coffee table. Lipstick stained. Fresh. And then Calla, barefoot, wearing his shirt. Naomi Ellis was used to dealing with difficult men. Most of them tried to out-talk her, out-plan her, or, when charm failed, undervalue her. But Grayson Lorne wasn't difficult. He was disciplined. The first time she stepped into his office for the pitch, he didn't scan her legs or raise a brow at her age. He asked about her process, her principles, why her designs always felt like they were hiding secrets in plain sight. It was the first time Naomi left a meeting with her shoulders relaxed. 3 days later, she landed the job. And not just any job. The redesign of Grayson's personal penthouse on North Dearborn Street. A place so quiet, so elevated above the noise of the city, it felt like the air had to ask permission to enter. Naomi had been in the industry long enough to know what these men usually wanted. A statement wall. A splashy art piece. Something cold and loud. But Grayson was different. No open floor plan. He'd said flatly, "I want privacy. I don't like being seen when I don't choose it." She'd blinked. Then why live in a penthouse with floor-to-ceiling glass? He held her gaze. "So I can see everything else." Their work sessions were always professional at first. Until one evening, while selecting marble samples, Naomi brought a bottle of wine as a thank you gesture. They talked about lighting, travel, and why she hated the term girl boss. She didn't mean to laugh that hard. He didn't mean to brush a lock of hair from her face. It wasn't planned. But chemistry never asked for permission. It just happened. By their 5th meeting, Naomi had memorized the scent of his cologne. By the 6th, she found herself lingering after sunset. By the 7th, she fell asleep on his couch, with her head on his chest, wrapped in a silence that felt like home. And that scared her more than anything else. Naomi didn't come from brokenness, but she came from reality. Her father was a kind man with a weak spine. When success tempted him, he followed, leaving her mother behind with grace and excuses. She'd watched love turn into memory. She promised herself she'd never fall for someone who made her question her place. So when Grayson started asking about her childhood, listening when she talked about her first failed solo project, or remembering her favorite kind of espresso, she tried not to read too much into it. But Grayson made it hard. He never touched her in public, never said too much, but when he looked at her, it was different. He made her feel chosen. 2 weeks before the betrayal, Naomi sat cross-legged in his living room, flipping through fabric swatches. Grayson handed her a cup of ginger tea and leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, just watching her. "You know," he said, "I've worked with a lot of designers. None of them made me care what my bedroom felt like." Naomi arched a brow. "That's not very romantic." He smirked. "It's not supposed to be. It's the truth." She hesitated. "You don't do relationships, do you?" He didn't flinch. "I don't do distractions." "And I'm not one?" He walked toward her, knelt, and touched her chin gently. "You're different. You don't chase. You build, quietly, and somehow you still change everything." Naomi's chest ached in that terrifying, beautiful way, the kind that made her want to run and stay at the same time. He leaned in but didn't kiss her. Instead, he whispered, "If I ever hurt you, it won't be on purpose." At the time, it felt like a promise. Now she understood. It was a warning. Naomi stood frozen in the foyer, watching a version of Grayson she didn't recognize. The man who made her feel seen was now someone who forgot to close the door on the past. Calla wasn't touching him in a way that screamed intimacy, but it was casual, familiar, and Grayson didn't flinch. Naomi's eyes didn't water. Her fingers didn't tremble. She simply turned around, left the way she came, and whispered to herself as the elevator doors shut, "I knew better. I just wanted to believe I was wrong." Naomi didn't cry in the Uber. She didn't call her best friend. She didn't throw the croissants in the trash. She placed them on her kitchen counter when she got home, untouched. Then she took the sketch roll from under her arm, set it on the table, and stared at it. A custom layout for the closet of a man who let another woman wear the shirt she once folded after late-night planning. The same shirt she pressed against her cheek when he wasn't looking. She rolled the paper up again, tight this time, and tucked it into the trash can. Not out of anger. Out of clarity. That night, Naomi couldn't sleep. She lay flat in bed, the room dark except for the blinking router light on the shelf across the room. A buzzing silence filled the air like fog, thick and present. Her mind ran loops, trying to rationalize. Maybe it was just a coincidence. Maybe Calla spilled wine and changed into his shirt. Maybe Grayson didn't even notice. But those thoughts didn't survive longer than a breath, because she had seen it. The comfort. The ease. It wasn't the presence of Calla. It was the absence of guilt. And Naomi knew that kind of comfort didn't happen overnight. The next morning, her phone lit up. Grayson, 7:12 a.m. You home yet? Grayson, 7:13 a.m. Brunch this morning? I'll meet you at L's if you're too tired to come up. Naomi stared at the messages. Her thumb hovered, then dropped the phone on her bed. 3 hours later, another message. Grayson, 10:26 a.m. You good? I figured you'd call me back. She still said nothing. No explanation, no dramatics, because when a man showed you who he was, begging him to be someone else only delayed the inevitable. The second night, he showed up. Naomi had left the lobby door code unchanged. She hadn't expected him to come, but maybe a part of her wanted to see what kind of man he'd be. Guilty, angry, defensive, none of the above. He knocked gently, twice. When she opened the door, she didn't let him in. Grayson looked confused. You okay? He asked. Naomi folded her arms. Should I not be? His brows drew in. You've been ignoring me. What's going on? She leaned against the doorframe, calm, icy. You should ask Calla. He blinked. What? Naomi's voice didn't waver. I came back early. You didn't hear me come in. I saw her, in your shirt, in your home, with wine. Grayson's mouth opened, then closed again. I didn't sleep with her, he said quickly. Naomi nodded. You didn't need to. Silence. Grayson ran a hand through his hair. She brought documents. Said she needed to sign something in person. I was about to eat, she opened a bottle. I didn't think anything of it. Naomi tilted her head. So you thought nothing of her barefoot, in your shirt, drinking wine on the couch you kissed me on? I didn't tell her to wear it. But you didn't stop her either. Grayson exhaled sharply. You're jumping to conclusions. Naomi raised a brow. You're dodging accountability. He looked past her for a second, maybe scanning the apartment, maybe looking for the version of her that used to smile at him when she opened the door. That version wasn't home. Naomi, you're the only woman I've ever let in. Calla's just someone who works for me. You know this. Naomi's gaze sharpened. No, I believed it. That's not the same. I didn't lie to you. You didn't protect me either. He stepped forward. She didn't move. I messed up. But I don't want to lose you over a shirt and a misunderstanding. Naomi's jaw tightened. It's not about the shirt. It's about the silence that followed. Grayson shook his head. You're not even giving me a chance to explain. I gave you access, she cut in, to my time, my work, my trust. And what I saw told me everything I needed. A long silence fell between them. And then Grayson finally said it. What do you want me to do? Naomi's smile was soft and sad. Nothing. I'm already done. She closed the door. 2 days passed. She didn't tell anyone, didn't rant on social media, didn't look for sympathy. She went to her studio, pulled up the blueprint files, deleted them. An hour later, she emailed Grayson's office. Dear Mr. Lorne, after careful consideration, I'm stepping away from the project. Please have your legal rep forward the contract cancellation terms. All unused funds will be returned in full by end of day. Regards, Naomi Ellis, Principal Designer, Naomi E. Interiors. Later that night, Grayson tried calling again. Then came a message. Grayson, 6:02 p.m. Naomi, don't do this. This is more than a contract. This is us. She didn't reply. She refunded the payment. She blocked the number. And she cried, for the first time, into her mother's throw blanket on the couch she now hated. Not because she missed Grayson, but because she hated herself for falling for the potential of him instead of the proof of who he really was. Naomi stayed away from mirrors for 3 days. Not because of vanity, because every time she caught her reflection, she remembered what she looked like in Grayson's eyes, trusting, soft, lit up with belief. That version of her didn't exist anymore. The apartment felt smaller now. Every corner reminded her of something he said. The silk throw he admired, the candle scent he once asked about, the decorative book on her shelf. He picked up and read aloud while she ate noodles on the floor beside him. It wasn't just heartbreak. It was invasion. He hadn't broken her heart. He'd occupied it. And now she had to evict him. On the 4th day, Naomi went into the studio. Her assistant, Liv, looked up, startled. Hey, wow, you're here. Naomi gave a half smile. Don't sound so surprised. I just wasn't sure if you'd need time off after, well, with Grayson. Naomi's face didn't flinch. It's fine. Just a contract that didn't work out. Liv blinked. You gave back 50 grand. Naomi shrugged. Peace of mind's worth more. She went straight to her desk, opened her laptop, stared at her latest client brief for a coffee shop remodel, but the words blurred. The floor plan didn't inspire her. The furniture mock-up looked empty, not in style, in meaning. She had spent months creating a space for a man who claimed privacy but invited confusion. And now she was supposed to pick out chairs for strangers? What was the point? She didn't tell Liv. She didn't tell anyone. But that evening, she took the train across the city and ended up at her mother's place. The apartment was the same as it had always been. Overgrown plants in the corner, jazz, humming from a speaker, and a warm scent of sage and something baking in the oven. Her mother, Elaine, opened the door, instantly reading the heaviness in her daughter's silence. Take your shoes off, and your pride. Then come sit. Naomi kicked off her flats and sank into the worn couch she'd once hated as a teenager. Elaine handed her a cup of cinnamon tea. Naomi held it, said nothing. After a few sips, her voice cracked for the first time. I didn't see it coming. Elaine didn't interrupt. He made me feel safe, Naomi whispered, like he wasn't like the rest. Did he lie to you? Her mother asked gently. No. But he let something happen, and he didn't stop it. Elaine tilted her head. Did you ask him to promise he never would? No, Naomi said, eyes stinging. But I asked him not to make me second place. And he did, anyway. Naomi nodded. Elaine set her tea down. Sweetheart, love doesn't come with guarantees. But self-worth does. That man might have made you feel seen. But he forgot to honor what he saw. Naomi swallowed hard. He said he didn't cheat. Doesn't matter, her mother said softly. Sometimes it's not the act, it's the permission. The door he left unlocked, the space he allowed. Naomi blinked, tears back. I want to stop loving him. You don't have to stop right away, Elaine said, wrapping her arm around her. You just have to stop staying in love with him. Later that night, Naomi pulled out her old sketchbook from her backpack, the one with frayed edges and ink-stained pages from when she used to. Designed just for herself, not for clients, not for men, not for money. She flipped to a clean sheet, and then, without planning or pressure, she drew, not a penthouse, not a luxury space. A woman's studio. Clean lines, bright windows. A space with energy and clarity. Warm wood, intentional shelves, soft lighting, and touches of copper. It felt like breathing again. She stayed up until 2 a.m., and when she finally stopped, her page said more than words ever could. This time, it's for me. Naomi spent the next few days avoiding anything loud. No music with lyrics. No clients with too many demands. No opinions from friends who only knew the surface of what happened. She needed space, not just in her apartment or her schedule, but in her mind. Space to think. Space to feel without explaining herself. So she stayed quiet, worked in silence. She took long walks through Lincoln Park and sat near the edge of the lake with her sketchbook. Her hand moved without force, forming furniture, walls, moods. One morning she wrote 3 words at the top of a blank page. Ellis. For her, she didn't know what it was yet. A name, a slogan, or a promise. But it felt like the beginning of something real. Naomi had spent years building spaces that made other people feel powerful. Now she wanted to build something for women who didn't just want beauty, they wanted belonging. She wasn't thinking about Grayson anymore, not in the way she used to. He'd been silence with charm, presence without permanence. A man who wanted to be loved but didn't know how to be safe for it. Naomi was done designing her heart around someone else's emotional blueprint. This time, she'd start with her own. Liv noticed the shift first. You okay? She asked as Naomi arrived one morning in wide-leg pants, a crisp blazer, and no trace of exhaustion under her eyes. Naomi nodded. Better than okay. Liv leaned back. You look new. Naomi smiled. That's the point. She moved to her desk, pulled open a fresh file, and renamed her folder from Client Concepts 2024 to Ellis Essence, Phase 1. The brand took shape faster than she expected. She created mock-ups for studios, salons, therapy spaces, home offices. She used color stories based on healing tones, deep rusts, earth greens, creams that felt like breath. She reached out to a few past clients who had become friends and pitched the concept. What if your space didn't just look good, but felt like it fought for you? The response was overwhelming. Send me your package rate. I want to do a refresh before the end of spring. My sister owns a yoga studio. She'd love this. Naomi realized that pain hadn't stopped her. It had redirected her. And in that redirection she found clarity. She still thought of Grayson sometimes. But the sting was gone. Now it was just a memory, a man in a beautiful space she helped create, who didn't know how to protect the heart standing at his door. Color hadn't mattered. Naomi finally understood that. It wasn't about her. It was about him. And the moment he failed to recognize her worth, without cheating, without lying, without even touching, that was enough. One evening, Naomi stood in her studio after everyone had gone home. The last of the sun poured in through the high windows, painting golden streaks across her floorboards. She looked around. This wasn't a space Grayson could touch. This wasn't designed for approval or performance. This space was her proof that she survived, that she didn't shrink, that she could be shattered and still stand. Before she left, Naomi pinned a handwritten quote above her desk. I am not what was done to me. I am what I did with it. She didn't need revenge. She didn't need closure. She had evolution. and that would always be louder than his silence. Have you ever had to rebuild yourself after trusting the wrong person? Maybe you gave someone your loyalty, and they didn't protect it. Maybe you walked away without a fight, not because you were weak, but because you finally knew your worth. Has that ever happened to you? Naomi's strength didn't come from confrontation. It came from walking away with her dignity intact and choosing to create something for herself. What would you do if someone made you question everything you thought was real? Tell me in the comments below. Share your story. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and tap the bell so you don't miss what happens next. Grayson Lorne had lived most of his adult life in silence. Not the kind that filled quiet rooms. The kind that made people think he was composed, untouchable even. He preferred clean spaces, calm voices, and knowing who had the upper hand in any room. But ever since Naomi stopped answering his calls, his penthouse felt louder than ever. The soft jazz he used to enjoy now echoed. The kitchen lights felt too white, and the couch, where she used to nap with one arm curled under her cheek, looked foreign. He didn't drink, didn't sleep much either. Calla hadn't come back. Not after the awkwardness that followed Naomi's unannounced visit. Grayson never explained anything to Calla. He didn't have to. The moment Naomi left, he turned to see Calla smoothing her hair and fixing his shirt sleeve like it was hers. He pulled it off without a word and handed it back. Calla had stood still, bare feet on the rug, watching him. "I wasn't trying to start something," she said. He didn't respond. "You were drinking. I figured you were lonely." Grayson stared out the window. "I'm not lonely," he said flatly. "I'm committed." "To who?" He didn't answer. Calla left quietly. She didn't return to work the next week. He didn't follow up. Not because he was angry, but because, for once, silence felt appropriate. Now, days had passed, and Naomi hadn't replied. He'd been the one who said she was different, the one who told her she changed things. And yet, when faced with a choice to defend that bond or let familiarity win, he hesitated. He didn't touch Calla, didn't kiss her. But he allowed the moment, and that moment cost him the woman who used to bring croissants and blueprints to his home, like she belonged there. Grayson sat at his desk now, staring at the design layouts Naomi had once printed for him. Every detail had been done with care. Not just aesthetics, intention. She'd designed storage where he never asked for it. Soft textures where he had only mentioned comfort in passing. A shelf positioned specifically so that the morning sun wouldn't hit him directly when he made coffee. It was all thoughtful. He hadn't even realized how much of himself she'd understood until she was gone. He picked up his phone again. No new messages. Her number still worked. But something told him, if she hadn't answered by now, it wasn't because she was indecisive. Naomi Ellis didn't pause people. She cut them clean. Later that evening, his business partner Miles came by. They were reviewing site plans for a new luxury tower downtown. Halfway through the meeting, Miles glanced around. "This place looks different," he muttered. "Warmer. You upgrade something?" Grayson didn't answer. Miles pointed to the kitchen. "That backsplash wasn't here last quarter, was it?" "No," Grayson said quietly. "Naomi designed it." "Oh." Miles looked around again, impressed. "She did good work." Grayson's jaw clenched. "Yeah, she did." After Miles left, Grayson stood in the center of the living room and looked around. Everything Naomi touched still stood, untouched. The warmth she added, the lighting she softened, the scent of the oil diffusers she once picked out on a random trip to the design district. It wasn't just a home, it was her fingerprint, and now, all of it felt hollow. That night, Grayson opened a bottle of bourbon. He poured a glass but didn't drink it. Instead, he walked into his closet, flipped the light on, and sat on the bench. Naomi had custom measured to fit his height and the width of his space. He remembered her sketching it, asking him questions he didn't understand at the time. "Do you like structure more than flow?" she had asked once. He'd scoffed. They're the same to me. No, she said, smiling softly. One lets you move. The other makes you feel trapped. At the time, he hadn't cared. Now he sat there, structured, trapped, and alone. Naomi didn't miss Grayson's silence. She noticed it, but she didn't miss it. In fact, noticing it was the clearest proof she'd made the right choice. The man who once texted her every morning had vanished. And not out of spite, but because he didn't know how to function without control, and Naomi had removed his access to her peace. That alone was enough. She spent her mornings now reviewing her new client list, all referrals from women-led brands, who had seen her Ellis Essence mood board and said, "I want that feeling in my space." They didn't want showrooms. They wanted softness with strength, function with intention. She poured herself into those designs, quiet, focused, undistracted. One afternoon, as Naomi arranged tile samples in her studio, Liv walked in holding a laptop. "Hey, this just came in. You might want to see it." Naomi looked up. "What is it?" Liv turned the screen around. A featured article on Chicago Spaces. 10 women, reshaping interior design culture in the Midwest. Naomi Ellis of Ellis Essence leads the charge. With a soulful, function-first design brand that's redefining power through beauty, comfort, and purpose. Naomi blinked. A photo of her, taken at a client's studio 2 weeks ago, sat front and center. She had forgotten about the interview request. Her heart didn't race. She didn't cry. She just smiled. Because this wasn't validation from Grayson or any man. This was her work speaking back to her, saying, "You didn't lose. You left." That night, Naomi closed her laptop early. She lit a candle, curled up in her reading chair, and picked up the book she had started the day after walking away from Grayson, Boundaries for the Bold. She didn't want healing to feel like revenge. She wanted it to feel like freedom, and it finally did. Across the city, Grayson walked into his office late. The glass walls reflected a man who looked tired, but not physically, emotionally. He hadn't been back to the penthouse since Miles visited. He'd been staying at a corporate apartment near their River North project. He told himself it was to stay close to the team, but the truth was simpler. He couldn't sit in that space Naomi designed without feeling her presence. And he couldn't feel her presence without confronting what he chose not to do. Kala hadn't called. He wasn't surprised. That night still hung in his memory, not because anything happened, but because of what he allowed to almost happen. Naomi didn't need photographic proof. She didn't scream or demand or spiral. She simply saw enough and left. That was what haunted him. Her dignified departure. Grayson stared at the wall where Naomi once held up 2 wallpaper options and asked, "Do you want your space to feel like a fortress or a haven?" He didn't answer her then. He'd shrugged and said, "You decide." Now, he wished he'd asked what she wanted it to feel like. The next morning, he received an email from HR. Kala had officially resigned. She left behind a 1-sentence note. "It was never my place to stay. See you." Grayson didn't reply. Not out of cruelty, but because he finally understood what silence meant. Naomi's silence wasn't avoidance. It was conclusion. Meanwhile, Naomi took her first walk through a new commercial space she was redesigning for a Black-owned therapy collective. The founder, Sela, walked beside her, pointing to a wide-open floor with mismatched chairs and harsh overhead lighting. "We need warmth," Sela said, "but also structure. Women come here at their lowest. This space can't feel clinical." Naomi nodded. "You want safety without silence." Sela smiled. "Exactly." Naomi ran her fingers over the wall near the doorway. "We'll curve this entrance. Build a recessed shelf with soft lighting. When women walk in, the space will feel like it knows them." Sela exhaled deeply. "That's what we need." And in that moment, Naomi realized something. Grayson may never have understood her value, but she did. And now, so did others. That night, she stood by her apartment window with a glass of sparkling water. No one stood behind her. No arms wrapped around her waist. No deep voice whispering promises in her ear. And yet, she had never felt more whole. Not because she won, because she finally stopped fighting for crumbs from someone who was never ready to give her the full meal. Naomi's flight from San Diego touched down 38 minutes earlier than expected. The sky outside O'Hare shimmered under the soft light of a spring afternoon, and the chill of the jet bridge met her skin like a familiar warning. The conference had been cancelled last minute due to an internal staff emergency. She could have stayed an extra night at the hotel, gotten some rest, caught up on emails, but she wanted to surprise him. She smiled at the thought, how his face would light up when he opened the door and saw her. She'd bring brunch from Elle's and that new sketch for the closet build-out he mentioned offhand last week. He wouldn't expect her, and that made it better. By 4:15 p.m., Naomi had grabbed fresh croissants, almond butter packets, and his favorite hibiscus iced tea. She had a little bounce in her step. Grayson always said he liked the way she appeared, unbothered. He'd tease her in meetings, say she never tried too hard, yet somehow made every room feel warmer. Today, she felt that energy again. Confident, feminine, homebound. As she approached the entrance to the high-rise, she didn't text. She wanted to walk in and let the moment unfold naturally. The security guard recognized her and smiled. "Back early, Miss Ellis?" "Couldn't stay away," she said with a light laugh. He buzzed her up. The elevator ride was smooth, fast. She glanced down at the croissant bag in her hand and smiled at the sketch tube under her arm. Everything felt right, until the doors opened. And nothing did. She heard it before she saw it. Jazz. Soft, slow, expensive jazz. One of Grayson's playlists. The one he'd said reminded him of his father. But the volume was too low, too intimate. The kind of sound you play when you don't want to talk. When you want to be close, without conversation. Naomi stepped into the penthouse, gently closing the door behind her. "Gray?" She called out, voice light. No answer. She turned the corner into the open-plan living area, her heels clicking softly against the floor. And then she saw her. Calla, in his shirt. No shoes, wineglass, half full, on the table. Her dark red lipstick left a smear on the rim. She was laughing, looking up at someone in front of her, Grayson, who stood with one hand in his pocket, a small smile tugging at his lips. Naomi didn't move, her hand clenched around the sketch tube. The bag of croissants pressed against her hip. Her first thought wasn't rage, it was clarity. So this is what it looks like when the door is open for more than one woman. Grayson didn't see her right away. He was turned slightly and Calla was reaching for something. His collar? A thread? She touched it lightly, and he didn't stop her. That's what killed her. Not that she was there, not that she was barefoot, not that she was wearing his shirt, that he let her linger. Naomi backed up slowly. Her shoes barely made a sound now. She reached the door, opened it gently, and stepped back into the elevator like a ghost. No one called after her. The doors shut, and the tears didn't fall. Back in the Uber, the driver asked if she was okay. She said yes, because what else do you say when the man you thought saw you fully let someone else take your place, without a fight? Naomi stared out the window as downtown passed by in slow, cruel snapshots. Streetlights turned amber, pedestrians blurred. Her reflection in the glass looked poised. But inside, her mind was sprinting. Was I wrong the whole time? Did he ever really mean the things he said? Did I just imagine what we had? She let out a quiet breath and whispered something she didn't expect. I should have knocked. But even that, she knew, wasn't the real problem. She should have never walked in assuming she was the only one with the key. Naomi didn't sleep that night. She lay under her throw blanket, arms folded tight, phone face down on the nightstand, untouched. The croissant bag was still on the counter. The sketch tube leaned silently in the corner, like a mistake she couldn't unroll. At 1:43 a.m., her phone vibrated. Grayson. 1:43 a.m., you good? I've been calling you. You home yet? She didn't respond. Not because she didn't want to, but because anything she said would make it real. And if it became real, she'd have to admit she'd been played, if not deliberately, then carelessly. Sometimes that was worse. By sunrise, she still hadn't cried. Instead, she got up, showered, and made tea. Not coffee. He was the coffee drinker. Always black, no sugar. She made hibiscus, poured it into a tall glass with crushed ice, and sat by the window watching people rush to things that felt urgent. Nothing felt urgent now. Everything just felt clear. At 10:07 a.m., her phone rang again. Grayson, she silenced it. Then again, 10 minutes later. Then, a text. Grayson, 10:19 a.m., Naomi, can we talk? I don't know what's going on. If you're mad, please don't disappear. We can fix it. That last one made her pause. Fix it? There wasn't a hole in the wall. There wasn't a scratch in the marble. There was a woman, barefoot, wearing his shirt, laughing in the space Naomi helped design. How do you fix that? By noon, she had packed the sketch tube in its original case. She opened her laptop and drafted an email. Subject, project withdrawal, Lawn Penthouse. Hi Grayson. After some reflection, I've decided to withdraw from the Lawn Penthouse design project, effective immediately. Please forward any remaining documentation to my assistant. I'll refund all unused project funds within 48 hours. Best, Naomi Ellis. No explanation, no anger, just a boundary in bold. She clicked send, sat back, exhaled. 2 hours later, he was at her door. She saw him through the peephole, brow furrowed, hands clenched at his sides. She opened the door slowly, but didn't move to let him in. His eyes softened. Naomi. She held up a hand. Don't, she said quietly. He stepped back. I need to say something. She folded her arms. Then, say it here. Grayson blinked. You left. You let me, she replied. I didn't know you were coming back. That's not the point, she said. You let her in, not physically, not just her body, her energy. Grayson looked tired. I didn't cheat. Naomi tilted her head. You didn't guard the space I trusted you with. He looked down, then back at her. She brought something over, a contract file. I didn't think it was anything. Naomi's face stayed neutral. Exactly. You didn't think. She's been in my life a long time. I'm not asking for her resume, she said. I'm telling you that what I saw tells me everything I need to know. Grayson's mouth tightened. I messed up. But don't pretend like this wasn't something real. You know it was. Naomi didn't flinch. That's the problem, she said. It was real, for me. You let it be casual. He stepped forward. Naomi, come on. Don't throw this away. She looked him in the eye. I'm not throwing anything. I'm walking away with what's mine, my dignity, my clarity, and my time. Grayson's chest rose and fell. You don't even want to hear my side? She nodded slowly. I heard it. You said nothing happened. But that's the thing. You let nothing happen. You didn't stop it. You didn't defend what we had. You didn't choose. She closed the door, gently, without sound. Later that night, Naomi sent the full refund. Grayson didn't reply, and Naomi didn't expect him to, because love wasn't about convincing someone you were worth it. It was about choosing someone who already knew. Naomi didn't expect peace to arrive quietly, but that's exactly how it came. It didn't knock. It didn't announce itself. It simply slid into her space the moment she pressed send on the refund transfer. For the first time in days, she didn't reach for her phone after sending a message. She didn't wait for a reaction, a reply, or a rebuttal. She just closed the laptop and sat in silence. That night, Naomi ordered takeout from the Mediterranean spot around the corner. She watched something silly on TV. Nothing deep, nothing romantic. Just a sitcom with canned laughter and predictable jokes. And still, it felt like healing. No triggers, no lingering scent of his cologne, no memory loop playing on a screen behind her eyes. The tension in her chest loosened, not all the way, but enough to breathe. The next morning, Liv found her in the studio before 8 a.m. Naomi was already at her desk, fingers scrolling through light fixture catalogues. Liv blinked. "You're early." Naomi didn't look up. "So's healing." Liv walked closer. "You want coffee?" Naomi shook her head. "I already made tea." She pulled a sticky note from her desk and handed it over. It read, "Design pitch, women-owned wellness spaces. Warmth doesn't beg to be noticed, it just wraps around you." Liv read it twice, then looked up. "You're pivoting the brand?" Naomi nodded. Not pivoting, clarifying. She had spent the past year growing a business that paid well but left her empty. It looked good on paper. Celebrity clients, high-rises, glossy magazine features, but it didn't feed her. What fed her was making women feel powerful through design, not by adding luxury, by giving them control of how they occupied space. She wanted to create rooms that felt like armor, soft armor, silent, beautiful protection. Grayson never asked what her design philosophy was. He liked how it looked. He never asked what it meant. That thought stuck with her, not out of bitterness, but as a measuring tool. Moving forward, Naomi would only stay where meaning was mutual. Meanwhile, Grayson stood in his penthouse staring at the wine glass Calla had used. It was still there. He hadn't touched it. Didn't want to. Everything Naomi left behind was gone. Her sketch tube, her laughter, her scent. But that glass? It stayed, because it was the last thing that marked where everything shifted. He hadn't heard from her since she closed the door. He didn't expect to. And for the first time in years, he didn't know what to do next. Grayson Lorne always had a next move. He was never without strategy. But Naomi wasn't a contract he could renegotiate. She was a consequence. He opened his email, reread her cancellation message again. No anger, no insults, just clarity. That was worse than shouting. It meant she had let go, without needing him to understand. It meant she had nothing left to prove. Back at the studio, Naomi was finalizing a design board for a new client, a therapist named Jada, who wanted her small private practice in Bronzeville to feel like a sanctuary, not a diagnosis center. Naomi pulled colors inspired by skin tones, deep browns, soft ambers, rich creams. She layered textures, velvet, raw wood, matte metals. Each selection told a story. Each choice honored a different kind of woman. She wasn't just designing spaces anymore. She was rebuilding herself, tile by tile, line by line. By mid-afternoon, she took a break. She walked to a nearby bookstore, browsed titles she never had time to read. And as she stood in the self-development aisle, one quote on a cover caught her eye. "Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all." She smiled. She didn't need to speak to Grayson again, not to explain, not to clarify, not even to forgive. She had spoken with her absence, and he heard it, loud and clear. Naomi's calendar was full by Friday. 3 consultations, 2 follow-up site visits, a call with a non-profit looking to redesign their women's shelter lounge in South Shore. But none of it felt overwhelming. Instead, it felt right. A rhythm that came not from pressure, but purpose. Ellis Essence was no longer an idea scribbled in the margins of heartbreak. It was her new heartbeat. Liv noticed the shift in the way Naomi answered questions now. More certain, less accommodating. Should we go with the softer gold or the brushed bronze? Liv asked one afternoon. Bronze, Naomi replied. It holds better against natural light, and we don't bend for trend. Function comes first. Naomi didn't flinch when she said it, because she wasn't guessing anymore. She knew who she was designing for, and it wasn't men who wanted shiny spaces with no soul. It was women who needed spaces that made them feel like they belonged even when the world said otherwise. By the end of the day, Naomi was back in her studio alone, scrolling through her updated brand deck. She had included a new tagline beneath the Ellis Essence logo. Designed with dignity, built for women, No fluff, no gimmicks, just truth. And this time, her name meant something more than a signature on a contract. It meant presence. It meant ownership. It meant she didn't owe anyone an explanation for choosing herself. Across the city, Grayson sat at the bar of an upscale lounge downtown. No one was with him. No date. No clients. Just a glass of untouched scotch and the weight of too many thoughts. He didn't recognize himself lately. Not because he'd lost Naomi, but because she saw something in him, and now that she was gone, it was like she'd taken the mirror with her. He'd spent years telling himself that women overreacted. That silence wasn't betrayal. That emotional distance wasn't cruelty. But Naomi didn't scream. She didn't accuse. She didn't plead. She withdrew, and that was the sharpest rejection of all. He looked at his reflection in the back wall mirror. Hair neat, shirt crisp, tie loosened. From the outside, he looked the same. But inside, he was fractured in ways that couldn't be fixed with charm or cash. Naomi had been the only one to ask him who he was beneath the structure. And he'd answered with absence. He let her walk out, not because he didn't care, but because he didn't know how to hold on to something that sacred. And now, she was building something real, without him. Back at her apartment, Naomi sat on her balcony with a notebook in her lap and the city lights glittering in the distance. She wasn't thinking about Grayson. Not really. She was thinking about the next woman who'd walk into a room she designed and feel, maybe for the first time, that everything in it was for her. She jotted down words: safe, solid, soft, sovereign. This was her new blueprint, not just for interiors, for life. At midnight, her phone buzzed. An email. From Grayson, subject line, "No response needed, just this." Naomi opened it. "Naomi, I don't expect you to read this. I don't expect you to reply, but I wanted you to know that you were right. I didn't guard what we had. I didn't say no when I should have. And I didn't stop what didn't deserve a place next to you. That wasn't a mistake. That was weakness. You don't need my apology to move on. But I needed to send it so I could stop lying to myself. Thank you for not letting me make you small." Grayson. Naomi read it twice, then closed the tab. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She simply whispered, "Good," and then opened her notebook to a new page. The invitation came on a Monday. A non-profit arts foundation was hosting its annual Women Who Lead conference downtown, and Naomi had been recommended by 2 separate clients to speak during the design and entrepreneurship segment. At first, she almost said no. She wasn't the type who liked microphones or big stages. She didn't need applause. But something in her paused. She thought back to the women she designed for in the last 3 months. Selah, Jada, the shelter director with 2 kids who whispered, "You made my office feel like I belong in it." They deserved to hear her voice. So Naomi accepted the invite. 2 weeks later, she stood behind the curtain backstage, palms a little sweaty, her notes folded neatly in one hand. She wore a navy jumpsuit, soft curls pinned back from her face, gold earrings catching the light. Liv stood beside her, beaming. "You're ready?" Naomi smiled without overthinking. "Yeah, I am." When the host introduced her, a designer reshaping how women feel. Power in the spaces they walk into. The applause was steady, not roaring, but warm, respectful, curious. Naomi stepped onto the stage, exhaled, and looked out into the room. She began. "I used to design for approval," she said calmly, "for men in glass offices who called me by my first name but signed the checks without looking me in the eye." Soft laughter from the crowd. "I used to think design was about proving I was good enough to be in the room. But I learned the hard way that the real room I needed to build was mine." Nods, murmurs. "And now, I don't design for men who need luxury. I design for women who need rest." The audience was silent, listening, really listening. "I design for women who have spent their lives pouring into others with nowhere to recharge." I build softness without shame, power without pretense. She looked up, steady now. I started Ellis Essence not out of ambition, but out of survival. Applause broke. She held the moment, not like someone unsure of what came next, but like someone finally comfortable with silence. Because now, silence didn't mean she was being ignored. It meant the room was holding space for her. Across the ballroom, near the exit doors, stood Grayson. He hadn't planned to come. One of his investors sponsored the event and casually mentioned Naomi's name in a newsletter. He hadn't seen her since the email. But there she was, on stage, radiant, unapologetic, and nothing like the woman who once bent over blueprints trying to impress him. He stayed in the back, didn't approach, didn't interrupt. But he listened. Every word, every pause, every piece of her story that didn't mention him, but somehow said everything about him. He clapped when others clapped, but quieter, because he didn't deserve to be seen clapping for her now, not after what he failed to protect when it mattered. After the speech, Naomi stepped off stage and into the small lounge area behind the curtain. She was alone for a moment, until Liv rushed in, hugging her tight. "You did it," she whispered. Naomi smiled. Felt good. A few organizers came to thank her. 2 women asked for her business card. One person from a corporate office whispered that their VP would love a consult. Naomi took it all in, but didn't rush to celebrate, because this wasn't her arrival. It was her real beginning. Grayson never approached her that night. He left before the dinner reception, quietly, but in his chest, something changed. He wasn't angry. He wasn't confused. He was humbled, because Naomi didn't stand on that stage as the woman he left behind. She stood there as the woman he never deserved. Later that night, Naomi sat in bed, her shoes off, makeup removed, hair tied back. She looked at a single photo Liv had taken from the audience, a side angle, of her on stage, hand slightly raised, face glowing under the spotlight. She didn't look scared. She looked sure. Naomi saved the image, not for ego, but as a reminder of what happens when you stop building your life around men, who only know how to decorate a space, and start building around yourself. The morning after her talk, Naomi woke up to a full inbox, 10 new consultation inquiries, 3 partnership requests, 2 podcast invites, 1 feature request from a Chicago design magazine that once passed over her, and a short message from a woman named Dahlia. "I cried during your talk. You said what I've always felt but never had the words for. I run a beauty studio in South Chicago. Can you help me make it feel like mine?" Naomi replied that same morning, "Yes, Dahlia. That's what I do now. That's what I've always wanted to do." By noon, she was back in the studio, hair in a bun, oversized sweater on, sipping tea with her laptop open to a new design deck titled The Soft Power Project. This was more than a rebrand now. This was a mission. She grouped her recent projects under themes. AA restoration spaces, for therapists, mothers, survivors. EO Rise rooms, for founders, artists, advocates. EA Return corners, intimate spaces to come back to yourself. Each room would speak. Each one would say, "You are not an afterthought here." This was her healing turned into service, and there was no turning back. Liv popped her head into the office. "You've got someone waiting in the lounge." Naomi looked up. "Scheduled?" "Nope. No appointment." "Said his name is—" She stopped. Naomi stood. "Grayson." Liv nodded slowly. "I didn't know if you—" "It's fine," Naomi said. She straightened her sleeves, adjusted her breath, and walked into the reception area. Grayson stood by the window, hands in his pockets. His suit was clean, understated, but something in his posture looked unfamiliar, smaller. He turned when she entered. "Hi." Naomi didn't flinch. "You need something?" Grayson paused. "I saw your talk." She nodded. "That's good." "I didn't want to interrupt," he added quickly. "You owned that room." "I didn't do it to be seen," she said plainly. He nodded. "I know." They stood in silence for a moment. Naomi didn't fill the space. She didn't soften it either. She waited. Grayson finally spoke. "I came because I needed to say something in person, for myself, not to fix anything. I know I'm not owed that." Naomi tilted her head. "Then say it." He swallowed. "You weren't a phase, or a moment, or something I didn't take seriously. You just didn't guard it," she replied. "I thought being present was enough," he said. "I didn't realize that presence without protection feels like betrayal." Naomi looked at him carefully. "I didn't need you to be perfect," she said. "I needed you to be aware. You didn't have to be loud about loving me. You just had to close the door to anything that made me question my place." Grayson nodded slowly. "I didn't know how." "I believe that," Naomi said. "But I'm not the one who can teach you." He didn't cry, didn't plead. He just stood there. And for the first time, Naomi saw a man no longer trying to win her back, but trying to understand what he lost. It made her feel something she hadn't expected. Not anger, not sadness, closure. Grayson took a small envelope from his inner pocket and placed it on the table. "What's that?" she asked. He looked at her. "The final layout you made for the walk-in. I found it in my drawer." Naomi stared at it. "I didn't keep it because of the space," he added. "I kept it because it was the last thing you created before you saw the truth." She picked it up gently, ran her hand over the label, then set it down again. "You don't need to hold on to it," she said softly. He nodded. "I know." He stepped back. "If you ever speak again, and I'm in the room, I'll be the one clapping the loudest." Naomi didn't smile, but her voice was kind. "I won't need to hear it. I'll already be looking forward." After he left, Naomi stood in the quiet. She didn't feel shaken, or uncertain, or thrown off. She felt anchored, because the woman he met that day wasn't the same one he'd let slip away. And now, neither of them could pretend otherwise. That evening, Naomi walked the lakefront path near her apartment, headphones in, breeze soft against her skin. She thought of the past version of herself, the one who believed being chosen was the goal. Now she knew better. Being centered was the goal. Being at peace was the goal. Being herself, in every room, was the goal. As she reached the shoreline, she paused and whispered to the wind, "I didn't need him to fight for me. I needed him to respect. I wouldn't fight to stay where I wasn't safe." And then she kept walking. Forward, always. Have you ever found the strength to walk away without saying a word? Maybe you stayed quiet, not because you were weak, but because silence was your boundary. Maybe someone expected you to wait, but you chose to rise instead. Can you relate? Naomi didn't raise her voice. She raised her standards. She stopped proving and started protecting her peace. That's not ego. That's growth. What does peace look like for you? Share your thoughts in the comments. Let's talk about boundaries, dignity, and self-worth. And if Naomi's journey spoke to you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. The story isn't over. It's just getting good. The official launch of the Soft Power project took place on a rainy Thursday morning. Naomi didn't rent a ballroom, didn't hire a publicist, didn't send out press boxes or beg for attention. Instead, she posted a single photo of a newly redesigned women's co-working space, soft, textured, layered with intention, and one sentence beneath it. Power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's quiet, grounded, and deeply feminine. Within 6 hours, the post had over 20,000 views. Comments flooded in. Women tagged friends. Former clients reposted her brand page. Architects and stylists DM'd asking to collaborate. Naomi didn't flinch. She sipped her tea, opened her laptop, and replied one by one. Not as a favor, not with desperation, but with clarity. She knew exactly who she was now. Later that week, she was invited to appear on a popular podcast for women entrepreneurs. The host introduced her as the designer who took her pain and turned it into beautiful, tangible space. Naomi smiled when she heard it. Not because it was praise, but because it was true. When asked about her turning point, she didn't name names. She simply said, "A moment came when I realized I'd been designing rooms that made men feel powerful, while I stayed small inside them. I don't do that anymore." Meanwhile, Grayson sat alone in his River North apartment, watching Naomi's interview on his phone. He had seen the post earlier that week, the Soft Power Project. It had gone viral on design blogs and LinkedIn, but he hadn't commented. He didn't want her to think he was watching, even though he was. The apartment around him was quieter than ever. No TV, no background music, just rain hitting the windows. He hadn't gone back to the penthouse. He wasn't ready. Not because of the layout, but because of what it represented, Naomi's presence that still lingered, and the guilt that lived inside every wall. Grayson picked up the phone twice to call her, put it down both times. Instead, he texted his assistant, "Get me a recommendation for a therapist. Not for business. Personal." It was the first time he had ever typed those words. 2 days later, he sat across from a woman named Dr. Arlette Monroe. Her office smelled like eucalyptus and wood. Everything was neutral, calming. "I don't know what I'm doing here," he said honestly. Dr. Monroe gave a slight nod. "That's usually the best place to start." He chuckled once, but there was no joy in it. "I lost someone," he admitted, "but not in the way people usually mean." "Then how?" Grayson looked out the window. "I didn't cheat. I didn't lie. I didn't even raise my voice. But I lost her." Dr. Monroe didn't interrupt. "She said I didn't protect the space we had." "Do you agree with her?" He hesitated. "I didn't understand what she meant until she left." Silence. She didn't fight. She didn't scream. She just walked away. "And what did you feel when she did?" "Like I deserved it." At her studio, Naomi was finishing a new layout for a community center reading room. One of the teen volunteers walked past and peeked in. "You designed this?" she asked shyly. Naomi smiled. "Yes." The girl stepped into the room slowly, hands touching the smooth edge of the built-in bench, eyes wide. "It doesn't feel like school," she said. Naomi tilted her head. "What does it feel like?" The girl looked around for a moment, then answered softly, "Like someone thought about me before I got here." Naomi blinked once. That was it. That was everything. Back in therapy, Grayson leaned back in his chair. "I used to think relationships were about compatibility, chemistry, matching rhythms." Dr. Monroe listened. "But I realized I never asked myself what it meant to protect someone's trust. I always assumed if I didn't mess up, I was doing fine. And now?" Grayson exhaled. "Now I understand that neglect isn't always about doing something wrong. Sometimes it's about what you let slide, who you fail to defend, what you leave open that should have been closed." Dr. Monroe nodded. "And how does that feel to admit?" "Like too little, too late," he said honestly. "But still necessary," she added. He nodded slowly. "Yeah." That night, Naomi sat in her kitchen lighting a new candle, spice, amber, and citrus. She played a quiet playlist as she scribbled notes for a new pitch. Across the page, she wrote one line. "Design is how you say, 'I thought of you,' without words." She stared at it for a long time, then smiled softly to herself. She wasn't thinking about Grayson, not because she hated him, but because she no longer needed to explain herself to the version of him that never asked the right questions. She'd already answered them, for herself. And she liked who she had become. The city of Chicago approved funding for a new women's advocacy and wellness center in Bronzeville. Naomi's firm was one of 3 invited to pitch for the design contract. She didn't hesitate. She cleared her schedule, pulled in 2 of her top assistants, and poured herself into the proposal. Not for competition, not for ego, but because this was exactly what Ellis Essence was built for. The proposal outlined more than colors and finishes. It detailed intention, a waiting room that didn't feel like waiting, EOCO counseling suites with texture-based calming zones, mother's rooms with hidden storage and warm lighting, private journaling nooks that felt sacred. When Naomi presented the deck to the committee, the board went quiet. One of the women, a city liaison in her 50s, leaned forward and said, "You designed this like you've lived it." Naomi met her eyes. "I didn't survive everything I've been through just to make spaces look good. I build rooms that give women their breath back." 2 weeks later, she got the call. They chose her. Naomi stood in her studio, barefoot, phone pressed to her ear, heart steady. "Thank you," she said calmly. When she hung up, Liv turned around from her desk. "Was that?" Naomi nodded. "It's ours." They didn't scream. They didn't dance. They just sat in the moment and let it feel earned. Meanwhile, across town, Grayson arrived at the city's development coordination meeting. He was one of the stakeholders on a separate housing project breaking ground near the new wellness center. He didn't know Naomi's firm had won the contract until he saw her name, etched in bronze letters on the early mock-up, designed by Naomi Ellis. Ellis Essence. He stopped walking. A junior architect beside him said, "You know her?" Grayson paused. "Yes." The man smiled. "She's brilliant. This is the third project I've seen go viral in the last month." Grayson didn't speak. He stepped inside. The center was still under construction, but Naomi had walked through every inch of it already. Twice. She'd picked the lighting to match skin tones, chosen paint that warmed in morning sun, curved hallways to avoid cold angles. Every room softened to feel like a hug, not an examination. Grayson stepped into the main lounge and froze. He saw it, her fingerprints, not literal, but emotional. The way the light moved, the way the flooring didn't echo, the way the seating formed natural conversation circles instead of rigid lines. He whispered to himself, "She made it feel safe." The site manager came up behind him. "We had a different architect on it at first. Naomi flipped the plan inside out, said we were thinking too clinically." Grayson nodded. She always did know what people needed, even before they asked. The next time Naomi visited the site, she found a folded note slipped into the blueprint drawer. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't long. It said, "You've built something I never could have imagined. You were never the decoration. You were the foundation." Naomi read it once, closed it, and tucked it between the pages of her design journal, not out of sentiment, but because part of her story was him. Not the ending, but the lesson. On opening day of the center, Naomi stood by the door in a soft grey blazer and heels that grounded her like a tree. The mayor's office sent representatives. Survivors showed up. Founders of women-owned businesses stopped by to shake her hand. Someone asked, "Are you nervous?" Naomi smiled. "No, I'm home." Later that evening, after the crowd thinned, she sat on one of the plush benches she designed. She ran her fingers across the fabric, looked at the framed quote on the wall. "You are allowed to take up space. Especially here." She didn't think about who wasn't there. She didn't wonder if Grayson had walked through it. Because this moment, it wasn't for him. It was hers. Fully. Finally. Quietly powerful. 3 months passed. Naomi didn't realize how quickly her calendar had filled. Studio projects, interviews, mentorship requests, and the occasional invite to speak at design panels. But she wasn't chasing exposure. She was protecting her integrity. Every offer went through the same internal filter. Does this honor my peace? Does it help another woman breathe deeper? Does it require me to shrink? If it failed any one of those, she said no. No apologies, no guilt, no second guessing. One quiet Sunday afternoon, Naomi walked through the Women's Center alone. The building was open, but the energy was calm. A small meditation group had just wrapped up in one wing. A mom read to her toddler in another. Light streamed through high windows and danced across her skin like approval. She made her way to the journaling corner, not to design, to sit. She curled her knees up on the bench, pulled out a slim leather notebook, and opened to a blank page. She wrote, "I've made peace with what I lost. I'm ready for what wants to stay." It wasn't a declaration. It was permission. Back at the studio that week, Liv walked in with a mischievous grin. "Someone's here to see you." Naomi looked up, brow raised. "Don't give me that look," Liv said. "He's not wearing a suit. And he brought pastries." Naomi blinked. "Pastries?" Liv shrugged. "That's got to count for something." Naomi stepped into the lobby. It wasn't Grayson. It was Corey Hale, the lead contractor from the Bronzeville project. He held a small brown bag in one hand and a folded schematic in the other. "Didn't mean to crash your schedule," he said, smiling. "But you forgot to sign off on the final materials list. I figured bribery might help." Naomi chuckled softly. "You brought almond croissants?" "Of course," he said. "We designers deserve the best." She smirked. "You're not a designer." "No," Corey said, "but I've been watching one every day who makes me wish I'd paid more attention in school." The room went still. Naomi didn't speak right away. Corey added, "If I'm overstepping, just say so." Naomi shook her head slowly. "No, you're not." They sat down at the work table. She opened the bag, took a bite. He slid the schematic over. Material approvals. Final review. Naomi signed, handed it back, but didn't get up. Instead, she looked at him directly. "You've been patient." Corey shrugged. "You've been building something sacred. I wasn't going to knock on the door while the paint was still drying." Naomi exhaled. It wasn't romantic. Not yet. Not even close. But it was gentle, and that felt worth acknowledging. Later that evening, Naomi sat on her couch, legs tucked under her, phone in hand. A new message buzzed through. "Corey, 8:27 p.m. I'd love to take you out sometime." No pressure, just something slow, something real. She didn't answer immediately. She read it, smiled, held the phone to her chest, and whispered, "Something real. Sounds good." Across town, Grayson sat across from Dr. Monroe in session. She asked, "What scares you most now?" He thought for a long moment. "That I'll become successful enough that no one ever challenges me again." Dr. Monroe nodded. "And what do you miss most?" He closed his eyes. The sound Naomi made when she was deep in a project, low humming, totally unaware of it. Dr. Monroe leaned forward. "And what does that tell you?" Grayson's voice was quiet. "That love isn't in what you say, it's in what you notice." Naomi hadn't noticed, but she was humming again. In her studio, at home, even in the women's center. And this time, it wasn't for anyone. It was for herself. A soft soundtrack to a life rebuilt. Not from rage, but from rest. Naomi met Corey at a small rooftop cafe in Logan Square. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't loud. It wasn't anything like the places Grayson used to take her. And that was the point. There were no tablecloths. No formal dress code. No background noise trying to impress anyone. Just low lights, warm wood furniture, and the soft sound of cutlery and conversation. When Naomi arrived, Corey stood and pulled out her chair. No rush. No pressure. "You look peaceful," he said. Not as a compliment, but as an observation. Naomi gave a small smile. "That's what I've been working toward." They didn't talk about work. They talked about favorite street names, places they used to sneak off to as teens, books they never finished but still kept on the shelf. Naomi felt the tension she didn't even know she carried. Soften. Corey wasn't trying to get in, he was just there. Present, warm, unhurried. And that, for Naomi, was new. Halfway through dinner, he asked a question that surprised her. "What do you miss about the version of you from before everything changed?" Naomi sat back for a second, thinking. "I used to believe love had to come with ache," she said softly. "I thought if it didn't hurt a little, it wasn't real." Corey nodded, not interrupting. "But now," she continued, "I want love to feel like a soft chair. No explanation, just comfort. Corey smiled gently. You deserve that. And for the first time in a long time, she believed it. Meanwhile, Grayson stood alone in the penthouse Naomi once designed. He hadn't been back in months. The space was untouched. The closet she drafted, the light she installed over the wine rack, the faint scent of the diffuser she chose. It all remained, preserved like a memory he didn't know how to let go of. But he wasn't here to reminisce. He was here to say goodbye to the man he used to be, to the version of her he didn't honor. He moved through the room slowly, eyes scanning the corners where she used to laugh, sketch, dream out loud. He stood in the doorway of his bedroom, where she once sat cross-legged, with a mug of tea, humming while scrolling through fabric swatches. His chest ached, but it was different now. It wasn't regret. It was acceptance. She was gone. And he had finally learned why. He walked into the closet, pulled down the envelope she once left. Inside was her original hand sketch. He looked at it one last time. Then, carefully, he folded it again and placed it in a small wooden box. He wrote 2 words on the inside lid. Thank you. Then he locked the box. Not out of pain, out of respect. Naomi walked home from dinner that night under a soft night sky. Corey didn't try to hold her hand. He didn't ask for more time. He simply said, "Let me know if you want to do this again." No rush. Naomi nodded. "I will." She meant it, not because she was falling, but because she was open. And that, for her, was the real win. At home, she lit a candle, sat on the edge of her bed, and exhaled, not because she was tired, but because she was whole. She opened her notebook and wrote one final line before sleep. I no longer wait for anyone to choose me. I already did. The Women's Center in Bronzeville launched a new mentorship initiative called Root Your Rise, a 6-week creative program for girls aged 16 to 20. Naomi didn't plan to get involved at first. She was busy with projects, new clients, and the steady expansion of Ellis Essence. But when one of the organizers emailed her with a short line, "The girls are asking for you by name," she knew she couldn't say no. Her first workshop was held in the corner lounge she personally designed. Plush seating, curved edges, warm light cascading through the upper windows. 10 girls sat in a semicircle with notepads and wide eyes. Naomi stood in front of them in jeans, a soft cream top, and sneakers. No makeup, no pretense. "Let's be clear," she said with a calm smile. "I'm not here to impress you. I'm here to tell the truth." A few of them smiled. "Truth is, I didn't grow up thinking I'd be anyone's role model. I just wanted to build rooms that made people feel like they mattered." She looked around. "Now, I want to build people who know they do." That day, she talked less about design and more about direction. How to protect their peace. How to walk away from anyone who confuses love with access, and how to never apologize for evolving. After the session, one girl named Kaylin waited until everyone left before walking up. "You said you stopped waiting for someone to choose you," she said quietly. "But how did you know you were ready to choose yourself?" Naomi's eyes softened. "When I stopped asking someone else to validate what I already felt inside." Kaylin blinked. "I want to get there." Naomi smiled gently. "You will. You're already looking in the right direction." That night, Naomi wrote Kaylin's name in her journal, not as a note, as a reminder. This is where she went, not to bitterness, to purpose. Across town, Grayson sat in a men's accountability group recommended by his therapist. It was his second session. He hadn't spoken during the first one, just listened. But today, he raised his hand. "My name's Grayson," he began, "and I used to think I was a good man because I didn't cheat or lie or yell." The room stayed quiet. "But I've come to learn that silence is also a kind of harm. That letting things slide when someone needs reassurance is not neutrality, it's neglect." One man nodded slowly. Grayson added, "I had someone once. She was the only person who ever looked at me and saw more than what I owned or built." He paused. "And I didn't betray her with my body. I betrayed her with my indifference." That was the first time he'd ever said it out loud. And when he did, he felt lighter. Not because he'd been forgiven, but because he finally understood. Meanwhile, Naomi was reviewing a proposal from a high school in Englewood. They wanted to convert an unused classroom into a power room, a creative studio for girls to rest, create, and regroup during school hours. Naomi studied the floor plan. She didn't just see a layout. She saw possibilities. A mirror that didn't judge. A seat that held tired shoulders. A rug soft enough to sit cross-legged and talk about real things. She called the principal personally. "I'll take it on," she said. "No fee. Just send me your list of must-haves and the girls' favorite colors." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Thank you, Ms. Ellis. You're changing the way they see themselves." Naomi smiled softly. "I'm just giving them what I never had at their age, a room that says, 'You belong here.'" Later that evening, she sat in her apartment, lights dimmed, jazz humming low. She didn't think of Grayson, not directly. But she did think about the version of her that once clung to potential. She felt proud of that woman, for letting go, for walking forward, for becoming more than her heartbreak. That woman didn't just move on. She became the place she always needed. Naomi didn't know why she hesitated when Corey texted her. "Are you free Friday night? I'd like to cook something. Just us. No pressure." She stared at the message a little longer than usual. He'd been patient. He never rushed. He never made her feel like healing was inconvenient. But this was different. Letting someone feed her, open their home, create comfort, that was personal. That felt close. And for someone who had once mistaken shared meals and late-night jazz for love, close was no longer casual. She typed out a response, paused, then deleted it, then typed again. "Yes, I'll bring tea." Friday night came. Corey's apartment was simple. Wood tones, warm lighting, and the faint smell of rosemary and something roasting in the oven. He greeted her with an easy smile and no expectations in his eyes. That alone calmed her nerves. "Kitchen's yours if you want to critique," he joked. Naomi stepped in, glanced at the clean countertop, the open recipe book, and the simmering pot. "I won't judge," she said softly, "but I'm watching closely." They ate by the window, grilled lemon chicken, roasted vegetables, and jasmine rice. Simple, good. Corey talked about childhood dreams, mistakes he'd made in business, and why he started working with community projects. "I got tired of building for profit," he said. "I wanted to build things that outlast me." Naomi nodded. "I get that," she said. "It's why I stopped designing to impress people who never plan to stay." After dinner, he didn't touch her hand. Didn't lean in. Didn't crowd the moment. Instead, he asked, "Can I show you something?" She nodded. He pulled out a folder from a nearby shelf. Inside were notes from his first community design project, one he never finished after his father got sick. Naomi looked through them, page after page. "You cared," she said without looking up. "Yeah," he replied. "I still do." At the end of the night, as Naomi slipped on her coat, Corey stood at the door. "I won't ask what happened before me," he said gently, "but I want you to know, nothing about us needs to rush." Naomi looked at him, really looked. She didn't feel a flood of emotion. She didn't feel fireworks. She felt safe, and that was more than enough. "I'll see you soon," she said quietly. Then she left, and didn't feel the need to look back. That weekend, Grayson stepped into the completed Women's Center one last time. No hard hat, no agenda, no announcement. He walked the halls with his hands in his pockets, head bowed slightly. He stopped at the journaling nook, ran his fingers along the edge of the curved bench. A volunteer nearby approached quietly. "Need help finding something?" she asked. Grayson shook his head. "No. Just passing through." She smiled. "Feels good in here, doesn't it?" He nodded slowly. "Better than good." The woman added, "The designer said it's meant to feel like Grace. No sharp edges, no apologies." Grayson blinked. That sounded like Naomi. The volunteer walked away. Grayson sat down in the corner, took a breath, closed his eyes, and let go. Not with regret, with respect. That night, Naomi sat on her balcony with a mug of warm tea. She wasn't waiting for a message. She wasn't wondering who was thinking about her. She was thinking about herself, the girl she used to be, the one who waited for validation, begged for clarity, and mistook crumbs for consistency, was gone. She'd left months ago. Where did she go? Here. Right here. To this quiet moment. To this peace. To this soft life, fully hers. Naomi didn't fall in love again all at once. There was no moment she looked up and realized she was ready. No sweeping kiss in the rain. No grand gesture to erase the past. Instead, it came quietly, in the way Corey remembered her tea order without asking, in how he left space in every conversation for silence, in the way he never interrupted when she was sketching. He simply watched, respected, then asked if she needed anything. They started seeing each other every Friday, not because they planned it, because it felt natural. Sometimes it was dinner. Sometimes it was a walk around the lake. Sometimes it was just sitting on her couch with no words between them at all. And Naomi didn't fear that. She welcomed it, because love now didn't feel like a negotiation. It felt like a partnership. One afternoon, Naomi walked into her studio and saw something new. On the wall, Liv had pinned up a printed quote in bold serif font. "Power is quiet when it's real." Naomi stopped and stared. Liv looked up from her desk. "You said it during your panel last week." Naomi chuckled softly. "I did?" "Yeah," Liv said, grinning. "And people haven't stopped reposting it since." Naomi stepped closer. She didn't feel flattered. She felt confirmed. She was no longer building for validation. She was building from wholeness. Across the city, Grayson stood in a newly renovated outreach center he had quietly funded. It was in West Garfield Park, far from the downtown towers he used to live in. He didn't tell anyone it was his project, didn't put his name on the plaque. He just showed up every Saturday to help with the renovations, painted walls, hauled boxes, assembled furniture. One of the women who ran the center thanked him again that morning. "You've done a lot for this place," she said kindly. Grayson shook his head. "I'm not doing it for the place." She paused. "Then for who?" He looked around. For the version of me that needed to learn how to be useful to something other than himself. Naomi's latest project, a rooftop community garden, was nearly complete. The owner had given her full freedom on design. She chose a blend of reclaimed wood, native plants, and hand-carved benches. At the center, she had a plaque engraved. She didn't put her name on it. It simply read, "Let peace take root where your name was once erased." Corey saw it during a walk-through and paused. "You wrote that?" Naomi nodded. "I used to think my worth came from being remembered. Now I know. It comes from what remains 7 if I'm not there." He stepped closer. "You're here now." She looked up. "I am," and she wasn't afraid of it. One evening, while folding laundry and humming softly, Naomi's phone buzzed. It was a message from Grayson. She hadn't heard from him in weeks. She read it slowly. "Grayson, 7:41 p.m. I won't take your time, but I want you to know. I'm trying to do the right thing with what I've learned. I see you out there, leading, building, loving without loudness. I'm proud of the woman you are. Thank you for walking away. It saved us both." Naomi stared at the message for a long moment. She didn't respond, not out of coldness, but because there was nothing more to say. She placed the phone face down and went right back to folding. Peacefully. The morning was soft with sun. Naomi sat by the wide window in her apartment, sketchpad on her lap, bare feet tucked beneath her. The light poured in slow and steady, brushing over the small plant-lined shelves, the coffee mug in her hand, and the quiet that had finally become her favorite sound. Corey was in the kitchen. He didn't say much as he moved. She liked that. He poured her a second cup before she asked, stirred in almond milk, set it on the table beside her without breaking her line of focus. She glanced at him. He didn't wait for praise. He didn't need it. Later, they took a walk through the neighborhood. No destination, no rush. Naomi held his hand, gently but with full awareness. She didn't think about how it looked. She didn't weigh the meaning of it. She just liked how their hands fit. At one point, Corey stopped and pointed to a mural on the side of an old building. It was Naomi's work from 2 years ago. Vivid colors, bold brushstrokes, a black woman with her head raised high, and words curved around the edge. Broken things don't stay broken. They grow back new. She'd painted it after Grayson had walked out. Now, she stood before it with someone who never asked her to break anything for him. Naomi tilted her head. I forgot this still existed. Corey smiled. Funny thing about art. It outlives the version of you who created it. She turned to him. He wasn't being poetic. He was being real. That's what she loved most about him. Corey never tried to impress her. He tried to understand her, and in doing so, he did something rarer than charm. He made space for her to be. That evening, Naomi got a call from Liv. We got the grant, Liv said breathlessly. The full one. Naomi froze. You're serious? Yep. They want you to oversee the design for the youth co-op in Bronzeville. Full creative direction. Naomi felt her heart rise. Not in ego, but in honor. I want you in every meeting, she said immediately. Not as my assistant, as my partner. Liv was silent for a beat. Then, Naomi, are you crying? Naomi laughed through the tears. Maybe. When she hung up, Corey was already looking at her with that familiar calm. You've always been the blueprint, he said softly. Naomi crossed the room and leaned into him. Not for support, but to share the weight. I never thought I'd get here, she admitted. He touched her cheek. You didn't just get here, Naomi. You built this. And she had. Every setback, every closed door, every heartbreak. It didn't break her. It redefined her. The next weekend, Naomi invited Corey to her rooftop garden. It wasn't a date. It was something else. Corey arrived in jeans and a short-sleeved shirt, a tray of cinnamon rolls in hand. Naomi smiled. He remembered her favorite. They sat on the carved bench she had designed months ago, surrounded by green vines and slow-blooming lavender. This place feels like you, Corey said after a while. Naomi looked around. It's quiet, she replied. But alive. He nodded. You ever think about what's next? He asked her gently. She turned to him. Not the future, just next. Naomi took a breath. I used to live in the future, always chasing, always proving. She paused. Now? I'm learning to just be where my feet are. Corey leaned back, eyes on the sky. So, where are your feet right now? She smiled. They're here. With you. He reached for her hand, not like a question, like a yes. Naomi didn't flinch, didn't pull away, didn't overthink. She laced her fingers into his and exhaled. This time, love didn't arrive loud. It arrived steady. Later that night, across the city, Grayson stood alone in his apartment. He wasn't sad. He was still. He'd spent the last few months quietly pulling his name off things, businesses, buildings, decisions he used to flaunt. Not out of guilt, but because he'd come to understand something Naomi once whispered during a fight. Power that demands attention is always afraid of being forgotten. He wasn't afraid anymore. On the shelf beside his couch sat a photo, an old one from their early days. Naomi was laughing in the sun, wind in her curls. He didn't move it. He didn't need to erase her. He needed to honor what she gave him. A knock sounded on the door. It was his sister, Janie. She stepped inside, gave him a long look. You okay? Grayson nodded. Better. She noticed the new books on his table, titles on emotional accountability, community care, and self-ownership. Janie smiled. You reading or just collecting now? He chuckled. Reading. Slowly. They sat for a while. She didn't push. He didn't rush. Before she left, Janie said something that stuck. Redemption isn't getting them back. It's becoming the person they'd be proud of, whether they ever see it or not. Grayson watched her go. Then he turned off the lights and sat in the quiet. Naomi didn't think about Grayson much anymore. Not because she hated him, but because healing had created space for better thoughts. She thought about the girls at the co-op who now had mirrors in their classrooms. She thought about her mother's voice on Sunday calls, finally warm again. She thought about Corey's steady breathing next to her in the morning. And she thought about the silence that used to hurt, now wrapped around her like calm. Naomi wasn't chasing closure anymore. She was living it. The last line in her newest journal entry read, I used to run toward love to feel worthy. Now I walk with it, because I already am. Hey, beautiful souls. If this story moved you, take a moment to share it with someone who needs healing, strength, or quiet love. Tap like if Naomi's journey resonated. Comment below, have you ever walked away and found peace instead of revenge? And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that honor real emotions, slow love, and inner strength. Love gently. Live fully. See you in the next one.